Welcome to Learn and Do with Peter on March 9th, 2024. Um, I thought I've actually kind of been prepping for this call all morning for an hour or two, hour and a half. I thought I would actually set something up, but what I did instead was kind of do like a nice overview of lots of stuff that's been on pending things, and I don't know. So I don't have anything set up, but I have everything set up. Um, so take a quick look at maybe over here. This might be easier to read. Take a quick look at some of the things we might talk about. Um, and I will pick something unless other people want to kind of get started want to talk about something. So raise your hand, just unmute and blurt out. Is there anything particular that we should talk about today?
Whatever you want to talk about.
Thanks, RJ.
Yeah, I really think that it's best when the host pretty much follows their passions and presents that
Yep.
because that's how these meetings can thrive, I think, you know?
Yeah. When they really sing, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Um, Looking at the crew here, we're kind of all image generators, but I might spend a little bit more time on LLMs this morning. Um, but so if anybody has questions while I'm talking, just kind of interrupt me or put something in the chat, and maybe somebody will interrupt me based on what you're saying in chat. The so um, I'm going to write one more down here, which is on top of mind, but Um, the looking kind of over like a fair amount of notes and open loops is the way that we say it in other places. Um, there's a lot of topics and they're all kind of important. Um, So I don't know, maybe that's what I'll do kind of is I thought one of the things that we could do this morning was kind of like look at all the stuff that's open loop and work towards closing some of the loops that are most open or longest hanging out or most important for people or something like that. So this is not super well organized, but I think that's okay. So one of the things that's going on is we look at LLMs. One of the things that's going on is we look at image generators. And then a big thing is that I'm trying to kind of make a list of how to set up your computer, how to know how to use your computer best to do AI stuff. Um, and then kind of in combination with that list I've got on HackMD, I added some like 301 or 401 kinds of stuff like installing Git or authenticating with GitHub. All the stuff I try to teach in this I think is useful, and I know some of it seems advanced, but it kind of interlocks and builds capabilities that give you superpowers. And usually when I'm trying to teach something, you can use it for a few different things, so it's not like a waste of time to kind of learn it. So a couple of things that we've covered. Well, let me. I'm still looking for alternative LLM front ends, ways to use ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or whatever through a different interface, so that you can use an API key rather than their $20 a month plus account. And I haven't had a lot of luck yet so far. I guess I haven't spent a lot of time on it. The ones I know best are terminal mode ones, which are actually really useful. But terminal is a whole thing in itself. Terminal and command line are kind of related to each other. They're similar, but not quite the same. So then GUI ones, I haven't really looked too much. I keep mentioning Mac GPT, and it's a good one. What I'd really like to find is uh, something maybe web-based or at least multi-platform. So the terminal ones are multi-platform out of the box kind of. Web ones would be um, web ones would be broken or multi-platform out of the box. I keep talking about this one here. That's something somebody else wrote and I customized a little bit and it's currently broken. Um, the Chatbot UI guy has a new thing, which is freemium, and I don't really like it yet, so I'm not even going to link it yet. But this is a good placeholder for having a web front end. We talked about image workflow and image viewers. I use Phoenix Slides on Mac. It's beautiful and wonderful. XNView is okay. I think IrfanView is okay too. It's been a long time since I've done Windows stuff, and XNView works on Windows and Mac, but it's a little bit more complicated than Phoenix Slides. We talked about image workflows and then Lightroom. Probably Leah talked about Lightroom a little bit, maybe not. So you can do image workflows, and you need an image workflow when you have hundreds of images or thousands of images, like some of us do. You need to be able to do stuff with them, put them in folders with some organization, figure out how to buy hard drives and stuff like that. There's an open source thing. Lightroom is an Adobe thing. It's super expensive, but it's what all the pro photographers use to manage all their photos. When you have thousands of photos, you need a tool. Darktable is an open source one, and it sounds pretty good. I haven't really tried it. RJ, so I guess one of the things I'd kind of like is to have a project that we're working on. And RJ I had the idea or suggested, how about if we have LLMs teach us stuff and be able to do assessments and things like that? How could we do better teaching ourselves with an LLM? And I've got some thoughts about that I want to share today. Another project would be writing a front end for a simple front end for multiple LLMs. And we could actually do that. Writing a simple front end for like GPT-4 is probably like a 15 or 20-minute exercise that would cover ChatGPT and using Python, but not knowing Python. The interesting thing would be to make it so it works with a couple of LLMs like Claude and OpenAI. I think the reason to do this is partly to be able to have an alternative LLM front end, but also to see how simple they are inside and also how they get complex. So these two are kind of like longer term projects that we might do every other session, for a while. Let me pause there. Does anybody have any thoughts? Or I'll keep going either way.
Well, if we could be working on things that are really practical that we would use a lot,
Yep.
I think that would make this thrive more than more like theoretical things or, interesting things, but not necessarily practical everyday usage things.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, RJ. Believe it or not, that's what I'm trying to do with all of this. All of this is like super practical and in the moment and multi-useful kind of. We didn't talk about we didn't actually do anything yet. We're just talking about doing something. But hang on just a sec, Jeannie. And so then the question is, what's practical for each of us, right? Is it just knowing lots of Midjourney tips and tricks? We could dig into that. Some of that might be useful for some of us and boring for others. Or what's how do I do the same things in Dolly or Midjourney, or what's the strengths of Dolly or Midjourney, or local LLMs would be super interesting for some people and boring for other people. So, and the funny thing is, RJ, I have to say, the very next thing I was going to show off was this thing called DXOS Composer. It's super interesting. It's a little bit like Obsidian or another PKM. Um, Scott, with his blockchain hat on, would be super interested in this, and it's probably theoretical for most people. Jeannie?
Oh, hi, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
Forgive my background. I'm still in background 101. Gee whiz.
101 is a really good place to be.
Gee whiz. When you get to the writing a front end for the multiple LLMs,
Yep.
can you start by explaining why we want to do that? Because I'm a real dum-dum. I need the why. Thanks.
Yeah. I don't think that's a dumb question at all. I think it's a really smart question. And maybe something like this is, so RJ said something really smart, which is like, hey, dude, just kind of do something practical instead of something like theoretical. This is actually practical, but it's practical in about 5 different ways. Um, so maybe part of the problem is picking something that combines too many things. Uh, so um, let me pick up, and this is let me, while I'm doing something, while I'm answering that question, let me also talk a little bit about how I'm organizing my HackMD page. And as you know, these HackMD pages can copy right over to Obsidian. So I can have a personal knowledge management system or a group management system, which keeps growing and building over time. Um, so I've got a list of topics here, and then what I often do will take one that I want to blow out and actually discuss, and copy that down somewhere in here. And this is all kind of messy and hard to find stuff. So I'm just going to start at the top. I could copy it to the bottom. I could copy it to the top. So this thing up here ends up being kind of a table of contents into places where I have more information about that thing. And then later, sometimes I will take a section like this and turn it into its own page in Obsidian. So why would we write a front end for multiple LLMs? The very first reason is I think it's really important to be able to break out of that $20 a month thing. Cheap. So this is, and one of the orientations that we have in AI Salon is that we're kind of at the cutting edge, almost the bleeding edge, but not quite. We're kind of at the cutting edge of like all this stuff, right? So like, wouldn't it be cool to try the Claude, API? Wouldn't it be cool to try Claude Opus, which is supposed to be a little bit smarter than GPT-4? And, so if you go to Claude, Claude Opus is the GPT-4, level kind of thing. Wouldn't it be cool to try that? And it's like, all you have to do is upgrade to Claude Pro for yet another $20 a month. So that $20 a month thing for every new tool is hard, right? So what if you could do that for cents instead of dollars? What if you could play around with a new tool for 20 cents rather than $20? So a big reason to have any front end is to, well, let's see, have our own alternative. So, and let me back up a step. I probably said something that was a little, I probably said three things that were kind of confusing and, you know, a lot to unpack. So a thing to know is that there's, I'm going to use my hands. And hi, Bobby. Hi, Roberto. We're kind of digging into AI 101 in a way, AI 101 and AI 201. So there's, with a large language model, there's the brain of it, the engine of it, and then there's what I'm going to call the front end. So the front end is when you go to ChatGPT, and now I'll stop using my hands, maybe, and go back to the screen. When I go to ChatGPT Plus, you know, the thing that you know and love, or Copilot or whatever, it's tempting to think that this is the whole thing. This is ChatGPT, but this is really a front end that's talking to the engine in the back end. So this is the front and that's the back, right? It's like the front office or the back office in a store, or front of house and back of house, the kitchen in a restaurant. Front end is what people use, and then the back end is the actual computer. And so it's set up so that you can buy wholesale access to the kitchen, the back end, for really cheap. It's usage based rather than monthly based, right? All you need to do is have a front end. So this is kind of like if you had a restaurant, you could swap in, you know, you could bring your whole dining room and put it in the front of the kitchen, in front of the restaurant, and then you would sit in your dining room and have the kitchen experience instead of sitting in their dining room and having, you know, the same experience. It's an interesting metaphor, kind of makes sense. So this for me is actually kind of a big part of it. The very next part is to see how simple it is to use the back end. So this is kind of like, so you can go out and find another LLM front end like MacGPT. We don't have to build one, but it turns out that a simple one, at least, is so simple that it's kind of nice to show it off. So I think it will help people. Seeing this part of it, I think, will help kind of understand the building blocks of that whole front end, back end thing. So when you go to somebody else's front end, sometimes it can be super fancy, right? Somebody got super excited about building the dining room part of it. It's got all this, like, you know, it's got a game room, and it's got a pool table, and it's got like all kinds of stuff that you don't actually need to just have a nice meal with, you know, the stuff coming from the kitchen. So if we kind of simplify that, like, how simple can we make that front end? How, like, and how complicated, you know, complicated or not complicated is the connection to the back end? It turns out it's like very, very simple. It's a couple lines, you know, a couple lines which are pretty easy to understand over the course of, you know, 10 or 15 minutes, 20 minutes of explanation. So I guess to see how simple it is to use the back end so that we have a better understanding of what's under the hood. And the reason for that is so we can make better choices about front ends, back ends, etc. It's a lot like most people, when they come to ChatGPT, and I'm going to use a car analogy here instead of the restaurant one. Most people, when they come to ChatGPT, it's like, this is a really nice kind of sporty luxury sedan. You know, you get to use it, and it's super easy to use, super fun to use. Always feels good. Um, what I'm recommending here with this part, to see how simple it is to use a backend, to understand that there's a front end and a back end. It's a lot like going to your luxury car and having somebody like say, hey, did you know that you could pop the hood and you can actually see the engine underneath? You don't have to figure out the engine. You don't even have to know how an engine works, but might help, you know, if you get a breakdown, or if you want to buy another car, or you want a mechanic to actually fix your car. It might help you to know that there's this thing called the engine, and it's not magic or anything. It's just engineering stuff. You open the hood and there it is. And you can even do simple things like check the oil, or see if the battery is corroded or something like that. Maybe you don't want to touch any of the guts, you know, you want a mechanic to do that. But when you go to the auto dealer, when the person says, let me take care of this for you, I can do magic with your car, it's like it helps a little bit to be able to step outside the car, watch them open the hood and go, I know what's under there. I know why they're doing that. And it's a little bit harder to pull the wool over my eyes if I kind of get some concept of, you know, when they start talking mumbo jumbo. It helps me to know a little bit, you know, kind of the parts and pieces of it. So that's kind of the idea here. So then to finish this off, and maybe we've gone too long on this, maybe not, I don't know. A couple other things here. Remember, I'm always, probably it's a bad habit of mine, but I'm always trying to do like 2 or 3 things at once, and I understand that's confusing. So this, for writing our own front end, we would either use terminal, which is good for lots of things. And again, I know this is Pete saying that, but it really is. Especially for people in AI. I wouldn't go into all this detail about computers and stuff that seems like developer stuff and things like that if we weren't in the AI space and we were at that cutting edge. So if you're at that cutting edge, you can kind of like follow along and be confused about stuff. If you know a little bit about things like the terminal, or things that like there's a front end and a back end, you're like super far ahead of everybody else, and you can get access to things cheaper or sooner or things like that because of just a few things that seem scary, but they're actually not that scary. And there are like scarier regions of it, but I'm not really going there, even though I know this seems kind of scary. So anyway, another reason for this is either use the terminal command line, or learn simple GUI concepts. I have a big preference that this is the right thing to do, even though this seems like a GUI seems like a safe haven. And then learn how to use Python, but not know. This again, where we are in AI, if you know how to use Python, and that sounds like a big scary thing, especially if you know how to use Python and the terminal, you unlock a bunch of capabilities, use cases, stuff sooner than other people and things like that. So all of these things together are kind of the equivalent of knowing, like stepping out of your luxury sedan, going over and popping the hood, and like maybe, you know, checking the oil, like actually touching the engine on the safe parts and doing some simple thing with it. And it kind of feels to me like that's, I'm not suggesting that we take apart an engine or even understand, you know, the difference between a reciprocal engine and a non-reciprocal engine, you know, or understanding I'm not talking about, you know, internal combustion or any of that, any of the theory behind that. It's just being able to open the hood and know kind of the parts and do a simple thing here and there, because it gives you a bunch of superpowers. You get your car stuck on the road. I at least know to look under the engine. If I see steam or smoke, I know that's bad. If I see fire, then I know it's really bad and I run away. You know, that's kind of it. So how are we doing, folks?
I'm not too sure any of that's really practical for the average person now. I mean, most of us are beginners. We have to walk
Okay.
before we can fly, and it's almost like I don't want to know how to pop the hood of the plane. I want to know how
Yep.
to pop the hood of the tricycle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Or another way to think of it is I need to know how to navigate an airport and get to the right city with an airplane. I don't need to know how to pop the hood on the airplane. Jeannie?
I think her hand
You're
has
muted,
been,
Jeannie.
Jeannie's hand's been up since it was up the first time. So I think,
Okay.
yeah,
Jeannie, you're muted for,
I'm here, I'm sorry. Your explanation was brilliant. So I fully understand where you're going now. So with that said, if you had that 20-minute session that you wanted to go in to build the front end of the LLM, I would be
yep.
there. I want to know
Okay.
that. So if
Uh,
that's something that the group wants in a separate session, sign up or something, just let me know. I'll do it. Thank you.
okay. Anybody else? Bobby's interested in the cheap access and also and RJ, I totally hear you. And we could have a great session on prompt engineering or um, just how to use an LLM without knowing much about the guts of it or having built a front end to it or anything like that. I think uh, I think we've got enough votes kind of to keep going on let's look at how a front end would be built for an LLM. And again, RJ, I totally get it. But let's keep going for a little bit and see. Let's take another break in 10 minutes or whatever and see what's going on. So I'll share my screen again. And I'm going to make a subhead here. So so this is why we would do this. And it was super useful to like think through why, why, and if that's still interesting and things like that. So, so let's talk about the components of if we were to build a front end for an LLM. There's something called the UI, the user interface. Kind of funny. There's a front end and back end even to the thing that we would write. So the user interface, and then that can be either terminal or GUI. So GUI stands for graphical user interface. When you're using a computer nowadays and it has windows like this, and I can like move a cursor around and click on different parts to do different things, switch tabs or highlight something. All of that is a graphical interface. I'm also going to put another acronym here. This stands for Windows Icons Mouse Pointer, I think. So this is kind of the parts of a typical GUI. So we're going to pick for our project, we're going to pick terminal. And we don't have to, talking about why is more theory than we need right now. So then the so the next part of it is the programming language that we'll use. Maybe I will do this in bold. So it doesn't matter too much. I mean, well, anyway, you've probably heard Python and JavaScript and whatever. We're going to pick Python. And then what backend do we want to talk to? And by backend, in this case, what I mean is what set of language models, what brand of language models do I want to use? This is kind of like the brand of the engine in a car or something like that, kind of. Maybe kind of like a brand of a car. So because I said multiple LLMs, I think that's a good thing. We kind of want to probably be able to talk to a number of them, not just one. We'll start with just OpenAI, I think. Okay, so
Well, I just had an idea. Can I ask a question?
yeah, please.
This all sounds somewhat familiar to me a little bit, in that I heard that there are sort of services that you could use that do this kind of thing for you, but charge you like a slight fee or something like that. And I was wondering if you know about that and you could comment about that.
When you say this, which this do you mean?
Enable a person to access multiple AIs at a lower price.
Yeah, that's a great question. And that goes straight to here, right? The reason we're talking about, I'll write alternative here. The reason why we're talking about alternative front ends, there's several reasons, but one of the first one that we talked about is just like it would be a lot cheaper. And maybe some homework that some of us can do. I will do a little bit of it. Let me make I already have a section for alternative LLM front ends here. I got into enough trouble kind of poking around at alternative front ends that it's funny, even to kind of present alternative front ends to do it well, I can actually, we, or you can watch me, I can write an alternative front end that serves like 70% of what you want to do with an LLM. I can write that in the time that I would take to like explore some different alternative front ends. So that's kind of why I think the other itches here that we can scratch, and we got some folks in chat saying these were good things. Between not having to pick one, understanding the building blocks of a front end so that you can do a better job picking one when you want to pick one, and then learning some extra stuff. This is kind of the better deal, writing our own, which I know sounds kind of weird, but I think it's true. Even if I'm kind of a beginner, if you've got an experienced mechanic to kind of like hold your hand and go, okay, don't touch that part of the engine, never touch that part of the engine, but this part is fine. Going through that kind of stuff. So anyway, But it's a really good question, RJ. And now that you've asked it, it gives me a little bit of space to take some time to actually go into that instead of maybe we'll get back to our writing our own. Uh, so the homework I talked about, and let me put a section here. This page of notes, I will make sure to get up on the website today. So if you're so inclined, all these notes will be up, where we can, and actually what we should do is do that at the end of this call. So it's there at the end of the call. Right now you can interact with these notes. You can actually write your own, notes on this, either by contributing to the sections I've got, or, you can make your own section down here. You can do whatever you want on this tool. And I guess I should share that link again for the folks new.
Could I ask another question? I was wondering how much time it would take us to do our homework. It sounds like this might involve a lot of learning.
Um, it's a awesome question. So this is the homework for me and for anybody who wants to kind of do it. And to make the homework easier, thanks for letting me continue to kind of like push the stack. It's called. I'm going to make a new thing up here in a in-person thing. This would be the parking lot maybe. I'm going to write stack here. Can we look at some pre-built alternative front ends? And making the stack was enough for me to lose, RJ, your last question, which was, oh, how hard would the homework be? I'm tempted to push the stack one more time and say, let's not look at these yet. Let's actually publish this to the website, but let's not do that. That's one level too much. Not for me, but for for us. And I don't mean, well, I don't know. Developers do this all the time. They have a stack of things and they keep 7 or 8 or 10 or 50 in mind, and they have lots of tools to do that kind of stuff. But we don't need to do it here. But since I brought up a stack, like a stack of dishes at a buffet. If you imagine yourself at the front of a buffet serving thing, you're in line, you got up to the thing, you grab a plate, and it's got those super fancy spring-loaded things where you grab a plate, and the next one pops up like it's ready to go. When programmers say a stack, that's what they mean. It's a data, it stores data instead of plates, but somebody puts things on that stack and it sinks down and hides them, and you can take things off the stack. Super bonus information, this is known as a first in, first out queue. There's other kinds of queues called first in, last out. Okay. So how hard would the homework be? Here's the homework. Search for alternative front ends. It should be super easy. It's like if I wanted to look for another freeware image viewer, and I did this earlier today, it's like, well, I know Phoenix Slides, I know and love Phoenix Slides, but I'm on a Mac. I can't recommend that for everybody. I know and don't particularly love, but it's okay, XNView. These are all free, by the way, and they're super useful when you're doing lots of images. So it's really easy to do. Maybe you know this trick, maybe you don't. You certainly do something similar to this. I go to a search engine, if I can type Google. Uh, you go to a search engine, and here it is right down here, right? Pete did a search for, okay, what's the, I know, actually it was how do I capitalize X in view is what I was really searching. But anyway, tell me about X in view. And then a trick is you can say X in view versus something else. So there's two versions, classic and MP. Uh, but here's a completely different thing, right? Here's a few different ones. There's a thing called Faststone. This is Lightroom/Bridge versus NXView. So already we have a couple alternatives, Faststone, NXView. The AI, Google's AI said, there's another one that people often think about, Irfanview. I've actually heard of Irfanview before. Maybe you would, like if you didn't know some of the background, the first things I would look at in the search is Faststone and NXView. But then as soon as you know like another one, you can search for Faststone and let's see. Oh, this NXView, somebody misspelled XN view. That's interesting. Let's throw another one in. Kind of the more that you put in here, you'll get a more focused comparison of them, right? This is the AI one, but even in the olden days, you would find a forum where somebody talked about them. Okay, so I did that as a quick demonstration of how you do this kind of homework, except for image viewers, free image viewers. Now, if we want to do the same thing for LLM, you would think it would be pretty easy, right? Except partly because it's new. I know there's ChatGPT. What if I do ChatGPT versus? Because AI is new, and because the whole experience of alternative front ends is new, we run into a problem with our search, which is that people are talking about the car models, Honda versus Toyota versus Lexus, rather than the thing that I want, which is an alternative front end. So another thing, well, I guess a thing that we might do really quickly is alternatives without guardrails, alternatives that are free. We actually don't want our free one because the free ones usually come with some hook, right? Some trick, what happened was as soon as ChatGPT was massively popular and there was API access to it, a bunch of people wrote their own front ends, and most of those front ends are, for advertising or you can use them for free, but you can use them for free for 20 times and then you pay more and stuff like that, right? So we could kind of try to go through this, but we end up with a bunch of mixes between like third-party, second-party things like Copy AI or Jasper. We also end up with some brand confusion. Do I want to use ChatGPT or Bard, or this is actually should be Gemini or Bing, or we end up in this kind of morass of like complexity about which I'm looking for a very specific thing. I'm looking for a free, hopefully open source front end to my LLM. I don't want a scamware thing. I don't want one that's run by advertising that's going to give me free access unless but it's going to make me pay sooner or later. I just want like a simple thing. I want, the front end. So it's actually a pretty difficult, the homework is not hard, but there's a lot of stuff to wade through. And there's enough, well, so the way I would approach this homework is to create a HackMD page or a page in my Obsidian, and then I would start listing out the different alternatives, kind of what I just did, right? I'll do that a little bit here. I'll make another section called looking for so so one thing is you pretty quickly find out that a lot of the search you're going to do is returning things like this, right? That is interesting, but not what we want, really. So then I would make these note sections as I'm going through stuff, like looking at that set of search results. I'm not finding what I want. I'm finding interesting stuff. I kind of want to keep track of it. I need to survey the space and break it up into, different kinds of, what am I even finding here? And are any of these things the things that I want? And so then every time I understand a chunk of that search space, I can kind of like name that search space and keep track of it if I want to. I'm just making blank lists here to make it easier to see how this is laid out. So I start like sorting the pile of stuff into different piles, and I name the piles, right? Kind of like giving stuff away to Goodwill. It's like, okay, I'm going to clean the house. So the first thing you start to do is you make the pile of things to throw away, things to give away, things that I'm going to deal with later or something like that, right? This is kind of the same idea in a set of search results. Okay, so that's a good description of the homework. Let's pop the stack. The things you do with the stack are push and pop. So you push a plate onto it, or you pop the stack, or you pop the plate off. And then I'm going to do a tiny bit of our markdown learning. This is how you make a checklist, and this is how you check off a checklist. You can also type it over here. Okay. So interestingly enough, you'll see that I didn't make a stack here because I'm not pushing things down and popping them off. I started a stack, but what I really got is a checklist because I have a hard time throwing things away mostly. Okay, so let's look at some front ends. The ones that I know about, the ones that I know about are skewed towards terminal anyway. So it is what it is. They're also skewed towards Mac because I've got a Mac and not Windows. I can't believe I didn't make the Windows thing here already. Let's look at the Mac one because it's a little bit easier. So Pete says there's something called MacGPT. I wonder if I can find it. A good search will get it to you, macgpt.com. So what does it do? One of the things it does is it has, this is kind of a magical Mac front end. You can just pop up a little input box probably anywhere on your screen and write your question, right? So that's great. Global text field that pops up in the middle of your screen. Great. Not what I need, not what I want, but maybe I would get to learn to love that. So I'm reading the web page here because I don't know why I'm reading the web page here. Because I guess I want to do, I want to let the developer do a little bit of a sales pitch for why we might use Mac GPT instead of something else. Um, this was another cool thing. This So this is more complicated than just a front end, right? Where it's multiple front ends bundled into one software package, which is amazing and wonderful. If I want to be a power user of ChatGPT, this is maybe what I want actually. So I've gotten far enough to wonder how much it's going to cost, right? So here you go. It costs 19 euros. So now do I trade that off? Okay, 19 euros, I get this cool global thing. So this inline thing is amazing, right? Anywhere I'm typing text on my Mac, all I do is say /GPT and then I give it a prompt and it does it, right? So that's in any app, any web page, I can have ChatGPT built into it because I've installed MacGPT. And this is kind of a front end, but the front end lives inside all of your text boxes. And you can just start with a keyword like that, /GPT. Or a wonder of wonders, you can have a menu bar icon. So menu bar for Macs is up here. It's got lots of icons that you click and they do different things. So that means that I can have ChatGPT whenever I want, just by going up here. I don't have to find my web browser or an app or whatever. So anyway, more and more stuff. So I might buy this. It turns out It turns out I haven't actually used it very much. But let's look at the front end that kind of looks like, and we've, for the folks who've been here before, we've seen this before. Sorry, we haven't gotten any farther than this. Hopefully you can kind of see what I'm doing here. I think to notice is this looks and feels different than the Lexus I'm used to. So, maybe I got into a Camry or maybe I got into a Jaguar. I don't really know. I'll kind of take the developer's word for it that this layout is better. He's got kind of a chat interface. So if I were an iPhone user, I might go, wow, this is so cool. Um, uh, uh, so the developer in whatever his product design thing was like, when people are using ChatGPT, it's kind of like having a chat, kind of like a chat on an iPhone. Why don't I set it up that way? So, nice, simple, clean interface. So again, once you pay your 19 euros for this thing, and again, we might not want to pay 19 euros for this thing, but anyway, if I paid 19 euros for this thing, then, and I'm using the native mode, that's the API key mode, this is costing me like tenths of cents to do this, not $20. If I did this a ton, I might get up to that $20 thing. It might even go higher, but there's pretty likely you'd have to use it a ton before you get up to $10 or $20. So already we've kind of got one of our things that we wanted to do was to save money, except for the 19 euro thing. Now we're doing ChatGPT on the cheap. And then because Pete happens to know about this and it's pretty high quality, I trust this developer because I've bought other stuff from him. We've got the other amazing capabilities like the ability to use GPT inside a text box from the menu bar, yada, yada. So this seems like a good value if you can afford it. And then it does that wholesale thing. So it checks, a couple of boxes, doesn't check all the boxes. And checks awesome boxes that we didn't even think about, right? Wouldn't it be cool if in any of your text boxes on your computer, you could just type /GPT and have it start typing? I could demo that. It would take me a little bit to figure out. I would have to read the instructions a little bit. I haven't done it. So if we spent a minute of reading instructions together, we could try that text box thing. Another UI, since we're talking about this, that's kind of free. You could use our old friend Obsidian. And it wasn't smart enough to, well, anyway. So here's Obsidian. It's a fancy text editor that does multiple text files at one time. I talk about it a lot in AI 101, and we won't get into the reasons for that right now. But a thing to know is if all I wanted was text from GPT and I wanted that wholesale pricing, you can get Obsidian for free, free for personal use. New folks, you'll be amazed about Obsidian, and old folks, I know you're bored about Obsidian already. But so you can get Obsidian for free, and then you can install a free plugin called Text Generator, and then Text Generator. I'm going to make a new text file here. I can type anything, highlight it, and press the text generator button, and it sent it off to GPT-4 again via that wholesale process. So this cost me, you know, 1/10 of a cent probably or something. I could even have a conversation. I should have copied and pasted that. You'll see Rayleigh scattering. So if I highlight all of this and do that same thing. So I can have a conversation with ChatGPT. I can get it to write any text I want. I can do things like summarize text, all of that for free, plus the wholesale price just through Obsidian. So this is yet another front end. It's kind of a weird front end. If you're already using Obsidian, this is like, wow, this is so cool. All I have to do is put this plugin and then I can do that. That's the one I would pick instead of MacGPT maybe. So let me show you a failure mode, a simple failure mode, but still a failure mode of for me, what, you know, once I start looking for alternative LLM front ends, it's hard to find them because there's a lot of search noise about LLMs in general and chat and AI and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of search noise. Once we start finding some good ones, a good search, by the way, for our homework, MacGPT for Windows. Somebody will have a list. So this is this is actually usually a good site. You know, if you have this app, I want an alternative to it. One of the problems it has is they're a little bit too general. So I was looking for a MacGPT alternative front end, you know, but what I got instead was different LLMs and, you know, stuff. So there you go, Llama 2. This is actually an alternative, but it's like saying, oh, you want an alternative to MacGPT, or you want an alternative to Alexis? I'll give you a tractor that doesn't have the engine in it yet or something. It's like, dude, I get it, but why would you, you know, anyway. So I thought this would be a great, you know, we can bootstrap off of knowing MacGPT is a good thing. Let's find a Windows one that didn't help at all. Let me show you, there was an open source thing called Chatbot UI, which looked a lot like ChatGPT Plus. I even had a customization which lets you export, excuse me. It was superb. It lets you export markdown stuff. It was wonderful. It's broken right now, and the guy who built that open sourced it, and then I tweaked it. He got excited, and he's like, "I want to do. I have so many things I want to do with the next one that I built this instead." So you can go find the code. Thanks very much. That's not very useful to me. Look at a demo. This is not very useful to me. The cool thing about this guy is he's a kind of a whiz at building stuff, and he's pretty good at UI, but he doesn't have a team that completes his UI. Um, so, um, so it used to be that you could use this for free with your API key. So the API key costs money, but then the interface is free, and it's a web-based thing. I used to use this on my phone. It worked really well. This is a brand new version. Like 9 months later. He's got a business model now where let me do a let me pretend I'm buying it instead of already bought it. And the reason, part of the reason to demo this is because I'm a little annoyed at this guy, and also this is a good kind of demonstration of what kind of problems you've got when you start, looking for free, looking for paid alternative front ends. This is actually a pretty good take on it, but it's got significant problems. So let me do sign up. So one of the problems he's got here is he doesn't tell you up front that it's going to be freemium. After I sign up, he's like, "Oh, do you want the free version for $0, or do you want the paid version for $10 a month or $8 a month if you pay for a year?" I'm like, "Dude, I wish you had told me that beforehand, because then I wouldn't have wasted my time, because that's not what I want." So I did sign up for the free one. Let me show you that. So this is me logged in on the free version. And the free version, what I can do is put my API keys in here. Super amazingly wonderful thing. This is a multi-LLM thing, which I think in this day and age, you want a multiple LLM front end. And maybe that's a reason not to pick MaxGPT now. So I've got my OpenAI key in there, my Anthropic API key. I could put Gemini. It turns out Gemini is down for the count right now. They're not giving out API keys, or Mistral or Grok or Perplexity or OpenRouter. This is cool that you can do multiple LLMs, and I know that kind of looks a little bit scary. It's not. Getting an API key and putting it in there is super easy. But so here's Pete testing out Chatbot UI with GPT-4 Turbo. Works great. I could kind of use this. Now let's try the same prompt in Claude. So this is Pete trying it in Claude. It got as far as here, and then it quit. I'm like, okay, great. I didn't try this. Sometimes this works with ChatGPT Plus, by the way. So here's a cheap introduction to Opus. Instead of signing up for that $20 a month. But you'll notice a bug here, and I think it's a bug in Chatbot UI. This amazingly wonderful slice and dice. He's got other. If you pay for stuff, he gets presets, prompt library. I don't know what custom mode is. He's got this thing called workspaces, collections, assistants. Amazingly wonderful tool. He's, I think, a one-man shop. He obviously doesn't have a QA tester, or I mean, he's probably using his users as the QA testers. He's got a bug here where it will give you about 15 words from Claude 3, and then it stops. Even if I say continue, it stops. So I tried it again, it stops. So now I've wasted all my time signing up for this free Chatbot UI thing, and it's broken, and I don't know what to do. And then I don't know if I can trust it to even do GPT-4, because what if that same bug kind of is general, and I don't know. So this is this is a picture, back to RJ's question. Could you show us some alternate front ends? We just did some alternate front ends, and you can see that they're very different sometimes. Sometimes the front end is hidden inside of your operating system or inside of your text editor, which is awesome. But as soon as you start hunting around, you're into this thing where maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. So, and then back to RJ's question, it sounds like that homework might be hard. Theoretically, conceptually, it's not hard. Practically, it is a big pain. And then even worse, you find a few alternative front ends. This chatbot UI thing, the previous version of it was awesome, and it always worked. And Pete had, I had hacked in an export thing. It was beautiful and wonderful. And now he's gone and kind of added a business model, made it more complicated, and now I hate it. This is where web. I didn't even put the new version. I put the old broken version that I have that I'm probably not going to fix, but I can't link to that guy because it's not useful. Okay, so let's come up for air a little bit. The next thing that I would do is either go back to our, let's actually write our own now that that sounds easier than finding one. That would be a good thing to do. Or we could dig in on the pre-built terminal front ends, one easy and one super powerful and a little bit harder. So what do we think?
I think it would be cool if you could make one, like you said earlier, and then show it to us, and that would be a lot quicker. For us, for all of us, because I think, well, remember how you said earlier, oh, I could make it myself in less time it would take to explain it.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, well, if that was true, maybe that would be a good idea. Like you could make it real, because that would save you time and it would save us time. And then you could explain it to us and then we could use it if we had questions. It's just an idea.
I like it a lot, RJ, and I'll tell you why that's not kind of what I would do. Or let me share my screen again. The truth of it is that I actually have done that already. That was one of the first things I did when I learned ChatGPT was I had it write a front end, and that's actually what I'm talking about doing here. Write our own. It's really learn how to use Python, learn how to get ChatGPT to write custom Python. This is super powerful. You don't need to know you don't need to know much about Python. You don't need to know Python. You need to know a little bit of how to use it. And then you can get ChatGPT to write all kinds of things. I want to take this file and chop it into small pieces. I want to put 3 files together. There's a bunch of cool things that you unlock. And this is a tiny bit advanced, but not very. Anyway, that was as we start to write our alternative front end, another reason is just to know how to get ChatGPT to write programs for you. So I've done that already, to your point, RJ. It's called Sylph. And let me make this smaller. And I'm not making this smaller so that you can read it. I'm making it smaller so we can see the whole thing. This is a whole alternative front end to ChatGPT. And a lot of this is like, a couple lines of notices, some kind of random Python junk. The guts of it is very, very small. So this is kind of like check your oil level complexity. It's not, understand how internal combustion engines work. The reason we're not using this, or the reason the balance, I guess, the balance between just starting with this and using it and writing it again, writing a similar thing again. The balance of that is that partly I haven't taken the 2 minutes it would take to reacquaint myself with how to use this. It's written a particular way that we'll get into in a sec. So part of it is it would take me a couple 20 seconds, a minute, something like that, to kind of get used to using it again, to even be able to demo it to you. I haven't done that. The other thing is, and I guess I did a pretty good positive sales pitch. I didn't do the negative sales pitch. Why we wouldn't do this? That would actually be a good. Maybe we'll
Can I
write
ask you
that
a
section.
question?
Maybe we'll, yeah.
Does that mean that you're not actually using one of these things now, even though you say that they save money, because maybe you don't need to because you already have subscriptions, or?
I am not currently using an alternative front end. That's true, because although there's a caveat there, I'm not using a front end, alternative front end currently, except once in a while, for a spot thing, because I have subscriptions and I just go use the web interface. But even that's not quite true. I use an alternative front end I wrote all the time to do image description. So that one is called Pixie. So Pixie is bigger. It's about 3 times as big, looks like. It's not very much more complicated. But anyway, once I knew how to write my own front end, I wrote, I'm like, well, Pete, you could use your front end. It's cute and wonderful. It was really a stepping stone for me to go, okay, now I need to do something with GPT-4 that I can't do very well on the web. What if I want to do image description batch instead? What if I want to do 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000 images at once and have ChatGPT, GPT-4 really, GPT-4 describe those images? So I wrote this. So kind of the precise answer to your question is I don't use it for I don't use an alternative front end for text. Every week, many times, I use an alternative front end that's tuned specifically for images, and I wrote it myself. So back to Sylph. I could use this, and so a reason not to build our own front end. The front end that we could build in 20 minutes. Now I'm looking at the time. We're gonna run out of time. It won't be very fancy. The thing that you could start off with is you could give it some text and get an answer back. There's actually the step after that, which is another set of programming. You can get an answer back and then you can continue a conversation. Just having a conversation with it is one level of a small level of complexity up from just getting one message. Getting multiple messages is a little bit more complex. But but if we know how to do it, then we can write other ones, right? Like it's like, oh, I wish I could send 100 images and get them described. Poof, I did that, and it wasn't that hard. So the other thing is, I guess my idea of this, let's build our own, let's have a learn and do project where we're building an alternative front end. We can kind of do it in stages, right? And at any stage, somebody, one person, or maybe a few people in the community can start writing what they want, start building what they want, customize a little bit more and things like that. So the long story is we could use Sylph, but if you see how I built Sylph, and it's recorded in the sessions, then you would know how to customize it better. And see the important, what are the important parts of this? What are the core parts that I need to keep, and what are the parts that I can customize and make different? So on balance, it kind of makes sense to write our own. And we would talk about how to, Sylph is a half step between give it one prompt and get an answer, and have a conversation with it. It's a half step there. And the half step we might choose to do differently, or sorry, the whole step we might choose to do differently if we were doing it as a team. I'm gonna look at the chat real quick. So Bobby asks, why are they giving access away free? They're actually not. And well, the thing I'm talking about is actually wholesale access to the engines. So wholesale access to the engines is really cheap compared to $20 a month. And when I say let's look at this pricing here. Tokens are about 3/4 of a word, I think. So this is a bigger number than $20, but if you think about it, I get 750 million, or sorry, 750,000 words for $30. So if I go down to a reasonable amount of usage, 7,500 or something like that, this turns out to be a few dollars compared to the $20. So this is a thing that's not free, but it is really cheap compared to ChatGPT Plus. The reason that OpenAI or Claude or Google does this is because the business they're in is actually not, even though this is the thing that we know it for, they're really in the business of building the engine, not the car. Because the engines are actually really complex, hard to build, incredibly expensive, require amazing design capabilities that are, part of the future and all that kind of stuff. All the big AI companies are building engines. They have to build a car because there aren't any cars around, but this is almost like a demo version of the car. They don't care if people buy this or not. I'm sure they have an internal business unit at this point who actually does care a lot. Their whole deal is making this better for people. And that business unit is the why we got GPTs, why we've got built-in DALL-E, stuff like that. But in general, so so there's if we can find an alternative front end or build an alternative front end, we can do the wholesale route, and it's incredibly cheaper. So now in that discussion we talked about free things. One of the things that you can get for free now is a fair amount of even GPT-4 usage. You sign up for, I'm not even going to say names, but you sign up for a service that that has a freemium model. They say, come use GPT-4 for free. And then you go there and you use it for free for a while. And then it's like, to unlock more things, add more tokens, buy more tokens and add them, or, sign up for $10 a month or whatever. So their business model is called intermediation. They figured out they can buy wholesale stuff incredibly cheap, and all they need to do is build a front end that's easy to use, and then charge, a lot for it. They need to keep their price, competitive and maybe a lot better than the demo version that OpenAI has. But anyway, they can suck people into their business model, and some of these people are actually awesome. Some of them are scammers, and there's a whole range of people in there, right? Some people just want to give you ads on top of, your use of GPT-4, and some users will go, yeah, I'll do that, no problem. So there is a free component to using an LLM. It's kind of a trap, usually, so I don't recommend that. So for the people coming tomorrow, the lucky or unlucky thing is I might keep going down this project. Uh, or depending on who's here, we might be able to swing the room and do something completely different, like image generation or something like that. To wrap this session up in the next couple minutes, let's do what I've been talking about real quick, just to get a feel for it, and then we'll redo it the next time we get to this topic. The trick with I'm going to go to this and search for Python. I know that I have a page called Quick Start. This is a prompt that you can start off kind of anything with ChatGPT to get it to write a Python script for you. So while it's typing, let me go back and do that or show you a little bit slower what I did. I happen to know that this is the Learn and Do site. It's called AI 101, but on the Learn and Do site, I happen to know there's this, and I happen to know there's this. So pretty much for certain kinds of scripts, scripts that work with files, all you have to do is copy this over to ChatGPT and then replace this with the thing that you want to do. And you can get pretty far just like that. You might have to go, customize that a little bit more. But I'm going to go over 5 minutes. Don't feel like you have to stick around, but it's worth trying to run this. This is a front end for GPT-4. So that's, it's not much more work to kind of understand the steps we did to get here. This may or may not actually work because LLMs. I'm going to call this Sylph2 because then I don't have to think of a name for it. And if we were doing this with a little bit more time, I'd describe a little bit more what I'm doing here, but oops. PB paste. And it hopefully actually gives you a lot of the instructions for doing the ancillary stuff that needs to be done too. There's things that it doesn't quite give you, so that's why it's helpful to have somebody like me to kind of say, here's some extra things that you want to do. This is a standard Python library kind of thing, called requests. And then I've got to set up my API key. I won't really describe how that happens, but, or actually I'm going to use this one. Oops. We'll talk about API keys and how that works. So now I'm ready to run Sylph2. And even though this says error, it's actually a soft error. It's not like a big problem. It just means, hey, you didn't tell me what you wanted to operate on. So Sylph is set up to just work with files. We could set it up to work with input, but it's another step. So let me make a file. I'm going to do it with touch. I'm going to make a file called input, and then I'll open this in, and it's an empty file. Why is the sky blue? Again, we're doing files here as the input mechanism. That was mostly because it was quick and dirty. We probably do it so I could type stuff here instead. But now, theoretically, if I do this with Sylph, I tell it the input is the input.txt thing I just wrote. So I think this is because my API key is old. Except I'm using the Pixie one, so that shouldn't be true. Let's make an API key real quick. Oops. Okay. Oops, wrong one. Console.open.com. Yeah, great. That's not the one I wanted. Platform. Since I've started playing around with OpenAI uses platform dot and Anthropic uses console dot, so I get confused. Let's make an API key. Create new secret key. Delete me. This is like a password, so typically you don't share it or show it on a recording. I'm going to delete it really quick. So if we just put this here, this is something we would have written to or understand why it's set up like this. So this source command enables that API key. Okay, so good one, Claire. We're speeding up here right now because we're in overtime, right? So it's like me dashing to the back and going, it's right here, it's super easy to use, it's just a wrench, no big deal. We've got a problem here, and let's try it one more time. What we usually do is this. Give it to ChatGPT and say, I get this error. This is my guess at what the problem was, expired API key. That's not it. So it would take a few minutes to debug this that we don't have. I'm gonna wrap it up here. But we're pretty close to having, the version 0.0.1 of our front end. So a few more minutes, we'd fix this. A few minutes after that, we'd get it to take input rather than do files. And then half an hour after that, we'd get it to have conversations rather than just single things. So there you go. Hopefully that was interesting at least. I know it was a little bit challenging, but we covered a lot of good material. I especially like the part about search engine strategies. That was fun, even though it's frustrating to look for LLM front ends right now. It won't be in like, well, we won't need to probably. In a year or two, you'll have your favorite front end that's not the demo model from the manufacturer. It's something else, a little bit more like MacGPT, and it's a lot more integrated into your operating system and your apps. So we're in a weird time.
Yeah,
Because it's AI.
and I found a front end that I had found in the past,
Mhm.
and another issue is they just disappear. So
Yeah.
they probably went out of business, or maybe they renamed their
Yeah.
URL, but I could not find them. And this was only like several months ago. They were like a front end where you could get access to any GPT, not GPT, any LLM that,
Yep.
had like an API service, and they would be the API, gateway sort of. But
Yep.
they just disappeared, and that was only a few months ago. So, yep, that's another issue.
Um, yes. I'm gonna write that down in our notes because that's a really good one.
Yeah, they were called open source.ai. And a couple of months ago, people on meetups were saying, oh yeah, they're really great. If you have problems getting access to an LLM, if you don't have an API way to get in, hey, just use this open source.ai, and they charge whatever, but hey, at least you can get in to your favorite LLM through their gateway, because they have API access. So, but yeah, they disappeared, so they're gone now. They don't
Yeah.
exist anymore.
Yep. The
Would that
Trail.
happen in your case here? I mean, in your case here, of what you're proposing, is there a middleman that's going to disappear? Possibly.
No. The definitely not, because we're the middleman, actually. A thing that might happen, and I'll put it in rationale cons, is API interface may change, meaning our app needs to be upgraded. But so instead of they go away, we just have to make some changes, and that would happen pretty slowly.
By slowly, you mean there's a long duration in between when it changes, but when it changes, it's like all of a sudden it changes?
No, especially with APIs. APIs are, I think people call them programmers. It's not a legal contract, but they call it a contract. An API is something that like the engine maker sets up so that you can use their engine, right? Then they know that people are going to write code against that, and lots of people are going to write code against, against means that works with it. They're going to write, people are going to have a lot of code built up, and the code is hard to change, right? It's very expensive to go in and change code. And it has downstream problems, like if I'm changing my code, then my customers, if I'm a developer, my customers might be impacted, the way that they need to use the thing might change. It's a whole big mess, right? So APIs in particular do change over time, but there's always a big overlap period where they'll introduce new features and a new interface, and they'll support the old ones for like a year or 3 years or something like that. So it's a good example, and this is kind of technical theory stuff that we don't need to know, but I guess I'll just describe it. I could go find the docs. ChatGPT itself, the first time I wrote Sylph, the ChatGPT version I was using had old knowledge. So it wrote the first version of Sylph so that it talked to the old API instead of the new API. And that wasn't, so OpenAI had one of those things where it's like, okay, this is the way that that you converse with the backend, where, yeah, here's the things that you can do with the backend. And then 6 months later, they said, okay, here's a new, better way to do it with the backend. You can still use the old way, but you don't get the new features. Anthropic just did the same thing. I found the Anthropic way to talk to it, and it's like, this one is, old, deprecated. We have a new version, so it changed. And that happens in an environment where what the engine does is well understood. That change wouldn't happen that quickly because it's AI, because they have new features that come out. They need to tweak the way that you operate with it. So they leave the old way, but they add the new way. And then this is something where it's like, well, we need this new feature from, Claude or from GPT. We'd have to upgrade this. And at some point, maybe 3 years from now or 5 years from now, maybe 3 years, considering it's AI, they might take away the old way. So then, 3 years from now, our thing would stop working and would need to get upgraded. But it's a simple upgrade usually.
Okay, thanks. That helps.
Thanks so much, folks. I'm going to do this tomorrow. Daylight savings time is tomorrow, so it's going to feel like an hour earlier, but it's at 7:30 Pacific, 10:30 Eastern. And unless the room kind of wants to go a different direction, I'll keep drilling down this a little bit, because it's the thing that, setting up our own and understanding how simple it is helps us look at others, like do better job shopping. And then it also unlocks the ability for some of us to do custom versions of that or continue to maintain it, make it better. And it's, the on-ramp is pretty slow. So there you go. Jeannie.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. This was very informative. So is the thought that when OpenAI ChatGPT comes out with 5, that the API keys change?
That is an awesome question. And let me think about it for a sec. An API key will last for if you think of an API key is, if we use the restaurant analogy, there's the dining room and then there's the kitchen. And I've been talking about the access to the API is kind of like the ability to use your own dining room, right? So if you think about that, they don't want anybody walking up to, they want to charge $20 a month to use their dining room. If you walk up to the kitchen interface and have that wholesale pricing, they're going to have you have a swipe card or something like that, right? Here's my swipe card. Here's my order. I want chicken chop suey. And then the kitchen will do it for you and assume that you're going to do the dining room part. I hope that makes sense. Kind of. The
Key is
API
like a
key,
swipe card.
the key is like a swipe card or a key, like a physical key. It unlocks services that the kitchen provides. So if you think about it, if they used to have if they used to have an Asian menu and now they have this new thing, a Tex-Mex menu, depending, they might say, oh, just use your same same swipe card. And you can now order Tex-Mex as well as Asian. That might happen. Another thing that might happen is like, hey, we've got this new gourmet steak selection that we can make for you in the kitchen, but you'll have to upgrade your swipe card. You'll have to use a different swipe card because it's got different pricing, right? Or even switching from Asian to Tex-Mex. You know, with the Asian thing, it was one price. Tex-Mex is another thing, and maybe they have a deal with a chef or something, and they have to pay licensing fees for their Tex-Mex menu. So if the pricing changes or the terms and conditions change, they'll want you to use a different swipe card. There's no reason for them to change it every time they like if they added a new dish to the Asian menu or something like that. It's like just keep using the same thing. It's the same terms of service basically. Same pricing, same terms of service. So it did happen to me that I had an API key that I was using with GPT 3.5, and then they introduced GPT-4 and it had extra capabilities. And so OpenAI said, hey, get a new swipe card if you want to use it with GPT-4, you need a new swipe card for different reasons, The old one still worked as long as I didn't try to do GPT-4. And then the new one worked with it's backwards compatible. The other thing is API keys are kind of like a collection of swipe cards. You don't necessarily have just one for, you might have like a whole wallet full of cards, maybe I'm a courier and I have swipe cards for different people I deliver food to, oh, I'm going to use Jeannie's swipe card and make sure she gets billed for this meal. I'm going to use Claire's, swipe card. I have a whole collection of them kind of in my, wallet. So API keys are cheap and inexpensive and easy to get new ones. And by cheap, I mean not even. API keys are like disposable, kind of like hotel card keys. It's not precious or anything like that. And if you lose one, they push a button and they give you a new one and invalidate the old one. That's kind of why they're super, reusable.
That was a good analogy. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, folks. I'll see some of you tomorrow. And thanks, Claire, for making me pictures.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank
Talk
you.
to you later.
Bye.